All right, so in today's video, we're going to be listening to Jared Polin's Raw Talk podcast. You know, Jared Polin, the I shoot RAW guy, up against Tony Northrup, the I shoot JPEG sometimes and that's okay guy. They have a lot of conflict when it comes to pretty much anything photography related. So I want to give my take as a much younger professional shooter. I'm 26 years old. I've been shooting for just shy of a decade now. So I want to give my perspective from two guys who are going to be giving their points when they've been shooting for probably many more years than what I have. So let's jump into it. We're going to do some sort of a scoring-based system where we'll listen to both arguments and I'm going to give the point to the person that I agree with from my personal perspective. So let's just jump into it.
It's just one of those things. So let's get into the meat and bones of this video. What is the meat and bones of your clickbait title video?
It's really encouraging people to start using the rear screen on their camera as opposed to always using the viewfinder.
Okay, so let's give some perspective on this before we get into their arguments. I just want to mention that I've owned 3 cameras so far. The Canon 70D, where you're kind of forced to use the viewfinder, is a single lens reflex camera. I've used the Nikon D3, which is also an SLR camera. I've also now currently using the Canon R6, where I have the choice between the electronic viewfinder and the digital screen on the back. So before I get into my preference and what I prefer using, let's hear them out.
And I'll give some background in this. Like, I started in film photography using, a Canon SLR film camera. And so, of course, the only way to shoot was to use the viewfinder. And that's the way I trained myself. That is my default, is to use the viewfinder. And then even in the digital SLR era, like the rear screen, if it autofocused at all, it sucked. So you always ended up using the viewfinder. So I always end up using the rear screen. But I discovered this was changing how I shot. One factor is it changed things compositionally because I was holding my camera out in my hands instead of away from my face. I found myself much more likely to raise it up or down. And of course, the height the camera is at drastically changes your perspective on the subject, especially with portraits, and it gives you more control over the background.
So yeah, definitely moving your camera up or down is definitely going to have a change on your portraits. But I don't think that just from using the rear screen as opposed to the viewfinder, I'm more likely to move my camera up or down. Whenever I'm trying to shoot portraits, I'm always trying to get every shot to be a bit more unique than the last one that I took. So even when I'm holding the camera to my face, I'm still going to be experimenting with different angles, up, down, left, right, diagonal. It doesn't matter. I'm trying to give myself a variance so when I'm culling later on, I can choose the best of the best. So I can see how he might be more likely to go up or down with the screen, but I think it makes no difference whether you use either or. I think that's just a personal preference as to whether you're going to be shooting at different angles.
So the simple act of taking the camera away from my face changed my composition pretty drastically. But it also, when I was shooting portraits, kept me more engaged with my subject because my face wasn't blocked and I felt like I had more situational awareness.
Now, this is where I'm starting to agree with Tony, because if you take a portrait photographer who constantly has his face and his eyes covered by the camera 90% of the time, even when you're talking to the person who you're shooting, you've got the camera over your face, it doesn't really make for good conversation. You're not really there. Whereas if I'm holding the camera out in front of me, maybe at like chest level or chin level, then suddenly I can make eye contact with the people that I'm talking to. Even when I'm shooting, I can still have my face fully out there so that they're looking at a person rather than a camera hiding a face. So I do agree with this point on Tony's side.
I've stayed quiet. I do. If you guys were watching video and you see my face, I'm trying to keep my face in check.
Twitching. He's sweating. His fists are clenched.
I wholeheartedly disagree with basically everything about that entire statement. The one I don't agree with at all is that it engages you more with the subject. I think that's a bunch of bullshit. The portraits have been taken for all of the history of time. Like, look through the lens, look over the lens. And I don't think it's not engaging to be like, I'm behind it. They know I'm there. And
yeah, he's definitely right. With pretty much up until mirrorless cameras became a thing, we were always hiding behind the camera. But just because we've always done it like that doesn't mean it's not better now with a slight change of not having the camera up to our face. So yeah, it's always been like that. Doesn't mean it's not better now.
You know they're there. And when I'm talking to them, I take the camera. I'm like, okay, this is what I like. That's right. Exactly. Go for that. And my hands go right back up to my eye. From a compositional standpoint, I feel like it is much easier to put your eye through the viewfinder, tuck your elbows in, bring it close to your face, which is going to give you more stability and allow you to get the composition, in my opinion, better. When it comes,
I also don't think that it's easier to hold the camera up to your face compared to holding it out in front of your body. I don't think that's easier. I don't really think it offers all that much more stability. Just because I'm holding the camera out in front of me doesn't mean I'm now Michael J. Fox and I'm suddenly shaking everywhere and getting the most blurriest photos going. Both ways are still going to be pretty stable. And if I'm working with a decent shutter speed, you're really not going to notice the difference between the two.
The high and low, like you're saying, that's a matter of just looking through the viewfinder and seeing high or low by bending your knees or moving forward or getting down low. I'm a squatter. I get down low quite often when it comes to shooting, and I try to find that different eye line, but I do that through the camera. The one place where it's, in my opinion, acceptable is those times where you need to put the camera over your head or on the ground.
So, in terms of both points that we've got putting forward here from Jared and from Tony, I'm going to have to give the point to Tony simply because now that I have the option to shoot between an electronic viewfinder and the screen that's on the back of my camera, I'm always choosing the screen on the back of my camera. Not because I'm moving my composition up, down, left, right more, not anything like that. Not even because of the situational awareness, but simply because I like looking at what I'm shooting on a bigger screen compared to a smaller viewfinder. If I can choose between having a little viewfinder like this and a 3.2-inch screen like that, I'm going to go for the bigger screen so I can see better what I'm shooting in that moment. So for me, my point's going to Tony on the whole viewfinder versus screen on the back of the camera.
When you see these kids growing up thinking that it's okay because they're using cell phones that don't have viewfinders. So they're getting trained that way. But then when they start to graduate to real cameras at this point, they continue this bullshit of holding it out in front of them and rely mostly on cropping for composition.
Okay, before we even get on to the next point, I just want to finish up this point that Jared has just made. Just because you're holding the camera out in front of you as opposed to up to your eye does not mean that you're going in with the mentality, not necessarily that you're going in with the mentality of I'm going to do a shit ton of cropping later. You can very easily hold the camera up to your eye and still go in with the mentality that I am going to crop a lot later. It makes no difference how you shoot. What you do in post, no correlation to that whatsoever.
Okay, for the people who have not been watching both of our channels for 14 years or more, I'll just recap. At some point, I made a video simply based on how to choose whether to shoot RAW or JPEG. This is before the era of HEC files, so those were your only two choices. And I gave scenarios where RAW was the right choice and scenarios where JPEG was the better choice. And some of those JPEG scenarios involve like you're a sports photographer and you're running into the buffer, or you need to ship 1,000 files off to a client and file size is going to be an issue, or you're simply running out of storage on your hard drives, that kind of thing. Those scenarios where JPEG. And then I taught people how do you get the most out of your JPEG, like how do you avoid clipping and stuff where you wouldn't need.
You know how you do that? You shoot RAW. That's how you avoid the clipping.
Okay, so we're getting into the whole RAW versus JPEG talk. I think it's pretty well known Jared is the RAW guy. For me personally, considering I shoot at a professional level, people are paying me to take photos of them or their weddings or their children, that kind of thing. I'm shooting RAW because if I'm taking pictures of something that I can't reshoot later on, if I'm taking wedding photos and let's just say in a terrible world, I've messed up the exposure. If I've shot RAW, I can then bring those details back out from the highlights. Or if I've underexposed, I can bring those details back out from the shadows. RAW files are basically going to save your life. So I don't understand why as a professional, you would want to shoot JPEG where the colors and everything is basically already baked into the image and you don't really get that much leeway with your editing space. I think if you're a professional photographer, you should be shooting RAW. If you're somebody who is in college or university and you don't really know what you're doing yet, then maybe shoot RAW and JPEG so that you can use the JPEGs now and come back to the RAW files in a couple of months when you've actually learned about them and how to edit them. So I think JPEGs are completely fine at an amateur level, or if you're just shooting for yourself. But I think at the very baseline, if you're a professional, shooting images that you're being paid to take photos for, you should be shooting raw. So let's hear the points.
And Jared was so pissed about this. I mean, he is always wearing a shirt that says "I shoot raw," so it is pretty clear how he feels about this. But I still, to this day, there are times when I'm just like, oh, I'm going to shoot raw. I'm going to shoot JPEG. I'm raw 99% of the time. But there are times when I do go switch and I know how to do it, and sometimes JPEG's fine.
It's not.
Sometimes it's better. Sometimes it's better.
It's never better. It's never better.
It is if buffer is an issue, if storage capacity is an issue. Yeah, it's better.
Storage capacity should not be an issue at this juncture. The cost of cards are so inexpensive, and the size of the files haven't gone up precipitously more for the difference in the size of the cards. Cards have gotten much larger. You shoot with 512 gigabyte cards that are pretty damn inexpensive. You're not going to fill the card anytime soon.
I think Jared is definitely right. I think all we really need to do is jump onto Amazon UK and we can pretty much look up a 512 gigabyte SD card. You're not filling this with any wedding. There we go. So we got half a terabyte that's going to live inside of your camera for £72.24. In fact, it's 32% off. It was originally £105. It's now £72. So for £72 for a card that you're pretty much never, ever, ever going to fill on a singular shoot, I don't think the whole topic of raw files are going to fill up my space on my card too quickly is even a topic. When it comes to hard drive spaces, it's so simple. You could get something like a 10 terabyte SSD. There we go. Here's an external drive that could live on top of your PC next to your laptop, £150, and you got 10 terabytes. Tell me that storage is a problem. So altogether, we're spending about £200 of an internal card that you're never going to fill and an external SSD that, again, you're not going to fill.
Over the last decade, you're right, storage costs have really decreased. But there are still sports photographers out there who need to wirelessly send every file they have to their editor.
They're not sending every file. I'll tell you that much. They're tagging the ones that they want to send, and they automatically get uploaded now because I stand next to them all the time at the games.
Yeah, but I've talked to a lot of sports photographers, and almost all of them are shooting JPEG.
Yeah, and they're wrong.
And I'll even say they're wrong. I'll even say most professional wedding photographers I talk to, almost all of them are shooting JPEGs.
Well, they're fucking idiots.
I agree with that. No, absolutely not. If you're a wedding photographer, you are not to shoot JPEGs. I don't care who you are, what sort of prices you are giving. As a wedding photographer, you just shoot raw. I hope Tony's not right. He said, let's rewind that.
They're wrong. I'll even say most professional wedding photographers I talk to, almost all of them are shooting JPEGs.
Most? Oh my God, I really, really, really hope that's not the case. I would imagine in my brain, I don't know why, but in my mind, no wedding photographer shoots raw unless they're like a 17-year-old kid practicing on their auntie's wedding. No, if you're a professional, then the reason why as a professional photographer you charge over £1,000, over £2,000-3,000, we're including storage capacity into our costs. So we have no arguments for saying, oh, well, I might just shoot JPEG to save on storage. No, it's included in your costs to keep up the cost of how much Lightroom space you're using, how many hard drives you have to buy, how many SD cards you have to buy. It's included in the price when the customers pay for you to be in their wedding photographer. Also, you are taking shots that genuinely could never be replicated again. We're taking shots of the first dance. We're taking photos of the first kiss. We're taking all these important candids that are going to be happening throughout the entire day. If you were to shoot JPEG and you mess up the exposure on one of these important shots, you need to be shooting RAW to be able to pull back these details. You just can't take the risk of shooting JPEG and hoping that you can just get away with it for what? Extra storage? For faster shooting? No, I refuse to believe that the majority of wedding photographers are shooting JPEG. I just don't even want to believe it. If you are a wedding photographer that shoots JPEG watching this video right now, please leave a comment below telling me why you shoot in JPEG as a professional wedding photographer. I would be so genuinely curious. But from my perspective and my opinion, I think if you're a professional wedding photographer, it should be a law. It should be illegal for you to shoot JPEG. It should be the law that you're to shoot RAW.
Well, they're fucking idiots.
I would not do that.
No,
I would
they're
definitely shoot
fucking
RAW
idiots.
for a wedding, but most of them are actually shooting JPEGs. It's not scientific, but most of them I
it's not
talk to are shoot JPEGs.
They're fucking morons. I will call them morons to their face. Now, when it comes to sports shooters, there's the I shoot JPEG because
I think it's a little bit different to shoot JPEGs when you're shooting sports, because when you're shooting a wedding, you're going from outside to inside. The light is changing constantly. So there's that higher risk of you messing up your exposure and needing it to be a RAW file to pull back the details. Whereas typically when you're shooting sports photography, there's not really much changing in the lighting. I think the worst case scenario, maybe some clouds will come over, but for the most part, the lighting that you're going to be working with throughout that sports session is going to be pretty consistent. So once you've locked in your ISO, your shutter speed, and your aperture, you're pretty much good to go. So as long as you're getting your exposures fine, there's really not much editing that you're going to do afterwards. So shooting RAW might not be all that necessary when it comes to sports photography when you're working with very consistent lighting. I think you could easily get away with JPEG, especially because you're going to be shooting thousands upon thousands of photos. I don't think it's the worst thing in the world to be shooting JPEG as a sports photographer who's working with pretty consistent lighting, especially when you compare that to being a wedding photographer.
I need to transmit. Okay, I get that, but I actually know.
Oh, good.
All
right. I'm glad you conceded that. There are legit reasons to shoot JPEG.
But I'm coming back to something after that. There are
That's why I tried to stop you quickly.
There are the sports shooters that will shoot the JPEG, but also save the RAW because they understand that they take the time after the fact to go back and make their images even better.
And that's absolutely fine. To shoot RAW and JPEG as a sports photographer is great if you want to get the JPEGs off and uploaded into the cloud straight away as you're shooting, so that somebody else can be edited them, so that they can be published pretty much straight away. Perfectly fine. And then you've got the RAW files to go back on later on to like edit for your own social media so that they can be slightly better. But again, I think shooting a RAW file compared to a JPEG where you've exposed perfectly, I don't really think there's going to be too much of a difference. So, and I also really don't shoot sports, so I don't particularly care. Okay, so both parties have obviously made really good points here. But in terms of just the straight up argument of always shooting RAW or sometimes going for JPEG, I'm going to be siding with Jared on this. I think you should just always be shooting RAW. If you have the capabilities to edit the RAW file, you have Photoshop, you have Lightroom, whatever you might have, you should just be shooting RAW and learning how to do it if you don't know already. I don't really think there's any situation where you should just be shooting JPEGs alone. I think worst case scenario, you should be doing JPEG and RAW. But otherwise, if you're out shooting, you should be shooting RAW files. So going with Jared, that I don't really see any situation where RAW files should not be an option.
Let's move to the next thing we've got, which is cropping, yeah. Tony. What is your stance on cropping? Wrong.
Well, first, my style of shooting is to overshoot. So I try to think about what the final use of the image is going to be. Like if
I like to do this. I pride myself on when I'm doing weddings and anything like that, I'm shooting candids. So I would much rather overshoot and then go through 10 of basically the same images later on and choose out the perfect one, as opposed to undershoot and potentially miss that shot that could have been. So yeah, I'm all for overshooting, especially because we're not in the film days anymore. We can shoot like 20 pictures raw per second. I'm going to overshoot.
I'm taking a picture of the Brooklyn Bridge to decorate my apartment, and I have a space on my wall, and I know it's going to be an 8:10 aspect ratio. Then I'll keep that in mind. I'll think I need to crop a little bit off the top and the bottom. But sometimes I'm like, well, I'm going to take this picture, and I don't know if I'm going to put it in a video at 16:9, or if I'm going to put it on Instagram at 4:3 or 2:3, whatever it is now. Then I tend to overshoot. I shoot one of everything. Do I want it to be wide because I'm going to make a really big print where you can see the details, or do I need it to be tight because it's going to be displayed on a small screen? So I shoot everything.
Okay, so when I'm shooting, I'm never really shooting with the thought process of this could be a square image later, this could be 4:3 for Instagram, this could be 16:9 for a video. I'm never really shooting with that in mind. The only thing I'm ever really thinking is I want to get a landscape version of this and I want to get a portrait version of this, so that when it comes to choosing later on, I'm pretty much able to deliver both images to the client, and I can take that portrait and put it on my Instagram. And if I want to use it as an example in a YouTube video, I've also got the landscape there as well. I'm never really going in thinking that like, oh God, I need to make sure that I can get a composition for a square aspect ratio for an Instagram. I also need to shoot another one for a YouTube, but I also need to shoot one for this particular wall site. Like I'm not thinking like this. I'm just thinking I want a landscape, I want a portrait, and that's that.
There was you want to know when I cropped? Do you want to know when I cropped, Tony? Breaking news. Say it. Breaking news.
Breaking news.
When it came to weddings and wedding albums, when you had to fit a not square photo into a square layout, into a wedding album, into a page design that I would do, it didn't matter. Why does it not matter? Because those aren't my fucking images. I'm taking the pictures for these people and I don't give a fuck. Like I care, but I'm just like, this is what fits. It's not my own personal work in my own stuff that I draw the line with cropping. It was like, it needs to fit this page. They don't give a fuck. I don't give a fuck. Give me my money. Let me get out of here shooting, let me get done with the wedding.
I definitely don't have that mentality or that much of I don't give a fuck, because I very much do. If they're paying me a decent amount of money, they're paying me to give a fuck about their images, and to definitely care about what I'm delivering. I'm sure to an extent Jared did when he did weddings, but I feel like he cared a lot less because they weren't his images, they were for the clients. So I think when it comes to whether it's my own personal images or whether it's weddings, I'm still shooting with the same cropping intent, that I'm trying to crop as little as I possibly can. But if I have to crop for their Instagram, or I have to crop for a certain page or a certain frame that they want, I'm trying to do it as minimally as possible. I'm trying to make sure that I'm not cropping as much as I possibly can, so I'm still preserving most of the image. I try to crop as little as possible. That's why I like to use the bigger screen on the back of my camera so that I can see what I'm shooting properly. And if I feel like I'm going to crop this in post because I want that composition where I'm closer to the subject, well, then I'm just going to walk closer, or I'm going to zoom in with my zoom lens and crop that way. I don't want to crop in Lightroom. I want to avoid it as much as I possibly can. I'm shooting at a high resolution. I want to export at a high resolution too. Okay, so there doesn't really seem to be too much disagreement between Jared and Tony between cropping. I think they're both pretty much in the same boat of really try not to crop as much as you possibly can. I know with Jared, he pretty much will shoot with the full intent of never ever cropping. I'm pretty much the same, but I feel like if I have to crop just 3% of my image to really make that composition pop, I'm going to do it. So I don't really think there is any points going towards anybody here, because I think everyone is pretty much in the same boat.
What's your take on a lot of these AI softwares that are really popping up? What do you think?
Well, so there's a lot of different things to this. I am all for AI that helps out the creators. AI subject selection, if it lets me more easily select the background so I can adjust the contrast, or great.
Dodging, basically, in essence, dodging and burning from in the darkroom. But
the stuff I used to do in Photoshop, if it does it for me faster. Great.
Well, but even going back beyond that, when we talk about selecting which subject to dodge, or I saw this with a lot. If you look back in the 1970s and 80s at the newspaper photos, you will see that, especially when they were shooting basketball players who so happened to be darker skinned, you would see that they would have dodged out the basketball player, and there would be this halo around the basketball player because they had to dodge it to allow it not to go completely dark.
Yeah. They also didn't have films that could properly expose dark skins. Right. Yeah, well, because even the film manufacturers were pretty racist.
Well, Kodak was designed for white people. Super racist. It was white people. It's all, and Lucy,
Kodak only adjusted their film emulsions because furniture manmanufacturers complained that it wasn't capturing like the mahoganies properly, and then they're like,
"Screw
okay,
black people." Here, screw black people. Let's worry about the mahogany. Now, someone's going to clip that out and say and cut that out, and that's going to be the wrong thing. Totally taken out of context. But Kodak was completely designed for white skin exposures. And then even through the 90s and 2000s, if you worked at a camera lab, you would test out, they sent test strips that were printed. It was color, all the different colors. And then it was this woman. I forget, what was her name? Do you remember?
Oh, yeah. I do know they always referred to her by name, but I don't remember. I want to look it up
Molly. Real quick. It wasn't Molly. Kodak test picture woman name. What was her name? Shirley. It was always Shirley.
Shirley.
So Shirley was the test subject, and it was a white woman all the time. And so anyway, the where I was going with that, with the being able to select the backgrounds and the people, and I'm equating it to what we did in the darkroom. We would literally cut cardboard out, tape it to a metal rod that wouldn't show up. The metal rod wouldn't show up. It wouldn't block enough light to interfere with their editing, but you would literally dodge by holding up this person-shaped thing, and you would squiggle it around as the exposure was happening in the dark room, so that it would not be a sharp edge, so you could see it, because you would want the edit to blend. It was like feathering by doing the shaking. Or if we were burning in, we would then cut a hole. Say you were burning someone's face, you would cut a hole around something and then just burn in that section. So back to your AI software is helping you.
Yeah. Anyway, so I support AI that helps the creator, but we're at this tipping point where AI is rapidly replacing creators, and this has already happened for like stock photography is now largely AI generated, and but for creators like us, like YouTubers, TikTokers, anybody making video, I think we're going to be mostly displaced by AI generated video. It's starting now, but we're 2026, 2027 for sure. We're going to see our views way down because.
Okay, so before they go more into this topic, let's talk about AI in photography, because it's definitely a hot topic and it's a 100% controversial. I've played about with a lot of AI on this channel. I made a whole video where I was taking a portrait image and a landscape image, and I fed Photoshop the portrait and asked this AI to extend it into a landscape to see how accurate it was. I like playing about with AI because it's fun, it's new. But what I really like about it is when it can help me with Photoshop. So for instance, if I want to remove something from the background, as opposed to trying to perfectly paint it out and blend it with the rest of the background, now I can just circle it, type into Photoshop, delete this, and its AI will just take care of it for me. So as somebody who's trying to speed up the workflow so that I can get back to my normal life, I love AI being implemented into photography in ways that it's going to help my workflow and speed up my workflow. But I definitely don't like this route that we're going down now, where sort of stock photographers and stock videographers are just basically being pushed to the side, because realistically, they're becoming less and less important, because I can just go onto a website, type in a prompt of I want an apple falling into a glass of water, and it will just generate that for me. I don't have to go and shoot that myself. I don't have to go and pay somebody to go and shoot it for me. I can generate that within the next 5 minutes if I wanted to. So I think it's great as a tool to help me get through my workflow. But what I don't like is the fact that it's starting to replace people's jobs. And people have always said like, oh, it's not going to replace your jobs. But for some people it is, and that's not good for the industry.
Is not that they're going to be making content exactly like ours, but they're just going to be AI is going to be making such compelling content that people are going to be spending more and more of their time just scrolling through this AI slop.
And that happens. I mean, you watch this now, if you scroll through your TikTok or you scroll through your Instagram, I can guarantee that if you did it for 10 minutes long enough, you will probably come across a reel that just isn't real. I've seen so many podcast clips that are just AI generated. They just don't exist. They're usually like gorillas and Pokemon, and they're just not real. It's fully AI generated. Even the audio that I'm listening to that goes along with the video is just not real. And if that's happening now in 2025, I thought it was 26, in 2025, I mean, what's it going to be like in 2030? It's just like 90% of content out there just going to be AI generated, because it's starting to get that way now. Are we just going to completely erase content creators, real content creators? I hope we're not going to go down that road. So I don't like that road that we're going down with AI. I like the fact that we can use it to help us in our jobs and to speed up our workflows. But in terms of replacing us as content creators, definitely not a fan of that.
But increasingly, it's going to be impossible to know the difference. Like a lot of people were talking about the video of the bunnies hopping on the trampoline.
Yeah.
And that's AI generated.
Yeah, what? I've seen that. Was that fake? Oh my God, it was fake. Don't get me wrong. I just watched it in passing, but this is... It's not real. Oh my God. I had no idea. Literally, as I was listening to the podcast then, I thought to myself, nah. I've grown up watching real footage and I've seen AI come in. I'll never get to the point where I'm going to be bamboozled by an AI video. Turns out I have been. I thought that bunny video was real. Yeah, so give it another few years. We are definitely not going to be able to distinguish between a fake video and a real video, especially if I've been caught off guard by rabbits bouncing on a trampoline. Yeah, we're screwed. So when it comes to the AI topic, there really is no arguments between Jared and Tony. In fact, it's actually nice to hear them have a conversation where they're not in a disagreement with something. And I think when you come to most content creators and we start talking about the implementation of AI and it also replacing people, for content creators, I think we all pretty much have the same premise of we don't want to get kicked off the website and we just want to use it as a tool to speed up our workflow. So there's going to be no points given there, but it was a really interesting raw talk to sit down and listen and react to and give my own perspective as a younger photographer brought up in a digital world. So hopefully you guys enjoyed that video. If you did, make sure to subscribe to the channel and check out some of the other videos I've got going on here. But otherwise, I will see you guys in the next one. Thank you again for watching.